The release of the upcoming Final Fantasy set is also going to have a major rules change, or maybe a minor rules change that is going to be very, very important for legacy gameplay. So today I want to dive into the changes that are coming with Urza's Saga in particular, and talk to you about some theoretical deck lists and play patterns that we're probably going to see coming. Hello folks, Phil Gallagher, aka ThrabenU here for another Legacy video, but not a gameplay video today. We're going to be talking about rules and theory for a little while here. And I'm going to use my Dealer's Choice donation deck list from Edison to fund this video. So Edison, thank you, and we're going to get into the nitty-gritty today. Now, in case you haven't seen it, we are getting a rules update regarding sagas here. So we're going to read the second paragraph here because this is the relevant portion. Starting with the release of Magic the Gathering Final Fantasy, we're updating the rules. If a saga has no chapter abilities, it won't be subject to the state-based action that would cause it to be sacrificed due to how many lore counters it has. Similarly, it won't be subject to the turn-based action that adds a lore counter to each saga you control at the beginning of your first main phase, each turn. For example, if your summoned Bahamut with one lore counter on it loses all abilities because someone attaches Observed Stasis to it, it won't gain lore counters via the turn-based action until it has chapter abilities again, probably because you removed the Observed Stasis somehow. So let's start with what the rules are right now as of the time of recording, prior to this update. Prior to this update, the most common way that this rules interaction comes up is with a Blood Moon effect and Urza's Saga. So as of right now in Legacy, when you play a Blood Moon, it destroys an Urza's Saga. And this has to do with the stuff that is in the top paragraph up here, where essentially the Blood Moon is destroying the Urza's Saga because the game is trying to look at what's going on with the lore counters and it kind of gets confused. And the result is, no matter how many lores counters that saga had on it, it would be sacrificed as a state-based action once it wasn't the source of a chapter ability on the stack, which is usually just absolutely immediately. So what you've seen plenty of times in videos is someone plays a Blood Moon, a Magus of the Moon, or Harbinger of the Seas, and that becomes a way to destroy Urza's Saga. Well, that doesn't happen anymore. So moving forward, what is going to happen when you play a Blood Moon is that your Urza's Saga is going to stay in play, and it's going to be a mountain. However, there is a little asterisk there that makes this rules change very interesting. Because on the surface, if you just go, oh, Blood Moon doesn't destroy Urza's Saga anymore, you would be like, okay, that's not that big of a deal. But now let's get into layers. Long story short, layers exist so that if multiple things are going to be applied to a card, you know in which order you apply them. And you start with layer 1 until you get all the way down to layer 7. And sometimes there are sub-layers for when things get really, really specific. So if we are going to change something into a mountain, that is going to happen in layer 4. So that is going to happen first, and then stuff can happen after that and still be allowed. So let's say that your Urza's Saga is at stage 2. It's got 2 lore counters on it, meaning that it has the ability to tap for colorless, as well as the ability to make an Urza's Saga construct token. That stuff is added in layer 6. So in the instances where you have an Urza's Saga with 2 lore counters on it, and then you play a Blood Moon, your Urza's Saga under Blood Moon is now going to tap for colorless or red, and it still has the ability to create Urza's Saga construct tokens. However, due to the new rules, it's now not going to continue to progress. So the resulting thing is, by playing a Blood Moon, while you have this Urza's Saga on 2, you have created an infinite token creation machine that every turn can keep churning out an Urza's Saga construct token, but Now the ways to address Urza's Saga have also been stopped, because what is the most common way that you are going to get rid of an Urza Saga? That is via Wasteland. Wasteland, unfortunately, has been turned into a mountain in Layer 4, and it doesn't get to use its cool ability anymore. Whereas Urza's Saga in Layer 6 gained abilities that it is allowed to keep under Blood Moon. And so the resulting product is that while Blood Moon used to be played as anti-Urza Saga technology, moving forward, Blood Moon might be played as supplemental Urza Saga technology. And this is something we've seen kind of before in Legacy. We have seen some lands players in slower games use a Thespian stage to copy the Urza Saga abilities and then turn the Thespian stage into something else before it is sacrificed to the third stage of the Lore Counter Urza Saga ability to create a Thespian stage Urza Saga conglomeration that just makes an infinite token forever. But this is really slow and mana intensive, whereas this new version of doing this just requires you to play Urza Saga, let it tick up to 2, and then play a Blood Moon. And then you have this monstrous machine that can keep pooping out scary construct tokens for the rest of the game. And again, it is not just Blood Moon, this will also work with Magus of the Moon, Harbinger of the Seas, or any similar effects. So this is the rules change that is coming. So let's talk about some of the implications here, some of the decks that might be using this, and let's talk about how big of a rules change this is actually going to be for Legacy. So let me get this out of the way first. I have received a relatively large number of messages asking me if Urza Saga needs to be banned immediately, if this is something that is going to break Legacy, and I think you all can relax a little bit. This is a big rules change. This is an important rules change. But let's start taking a look at what these deck lists are going to potentially look like. This first deck is one that I am going to play on the channel, probably next week, maybe the following week. Kind of depends on where exactly my recording schedule falls relative to the release. But this is a list that Michael Levine sent me, which is an attempt at what Blood Moon Urza Saga Stompy might look like. Moxfield is great, by the way. Shout out to Moxfield for just being able to share deck lists so easily. And let's start with our colorless lands over here. So normally when you are playing Moon Stompy, you want 4 Ancient Tomb, 4 City of Traders, so you can power out 3 drops as consistently as possible. But you certainly cannot get away with 4 Ancient Tomb, 4 City of Traders, and 4 Urza Saga in the Moon Stompy mana base. That is, frankly, just too much colorless mana, and you are just going to be too bad at casting your red cards if you try to get that greedy. I know I historically am very afraid of even playing something like Gemstone Caverns because I am worried about it being a colorless land when the situation is not right for it. And I tend to err on the side of playing more basic mountains than a lot of other people. And every time you take a soul land out of your deck, you are actually pretty drastically decreasing the chances that you are going to get your turn 1 3 mana play out consistently, at least without mulliganing. And a lot of the cards in your deck, like the Blood Moons and the Magus of the Moons, are best if they are played out immediately on turn 1 before your opponent gets a single chance to fetch. And so the big question here with a deck list like this one is going to be, is the juice worth the squeeze? Is being able to add Urza's Saga into this deck as a resilient finisher better than just playing something that starts trying to get your opponent dead or playing a lock piece immediately? And this will certainly be a function of the metagame. This is something that is powerful, though. You have 8 main deck moon effects, Urza's Saga as sort of this backup plan, and you're going to be able to attack from a lot of angles. So you can get the easy lockout wins with Blood Moon, Chalice, Magus of the Moon. That's all fine and expected. You can grind things out with Urza's Saga. You can grind things out with the One Ring. Your Urza Saga can offer you some interesting options. So, for example, you can get a manifold key so that you can untap your one ring and go really, really deep when you get to the mid game and end game. When you have pitch cards like Fury that you can just throw with Broadside, if you draw, 9 cards in a turn with the One Ring, there's a very good chance that you can just find lethal burn damage with Broadside. And this can also potentially give you access to Shadow Spear, meaning that this army of increasingly growing Urza Saga construct tokens can come with Lifelink and Trample as well to kind of get them through the chump blockers that your opponent might have from things like Orcish Bowmasters or whatever. Now, of note here, you do have to make room for cards like Manifold Key and Shadow Spear in your deck, which might mean that you are missing out on something that a traditional Moonstompy deck might be bringing to the table. For example, you might have 4 Furies in the main deck of a more traditional build. Or going back to some of the older builds, you might have some other aggressive creatures, your Goblin Ravelmasters, Laelia, that sort of thing. Or even Trinispheres in certain metagames. But this does also bring some other utility to the table. So, for example, we are currently in a metagame where it is very, very common to play 4x Leyline of the Void. Well, you can still do that, but gain access to silver bullets out of the sideboard, like your Grafdigger's Cage, your Soul Guide Lanterns, Pithing Needles for opposing One Rings, and things of that nature. So this can give a more toolboxy approach to Moonstompy than what it traditionally has right now. We will probably learn very, very quickly, and I mean within 2 weeks, whether or not Urza's Saga Moonstompy is better than traditional Moonstompy. My gut feeling is that traditional Moonstompy is just going to be better out of the gates. And over time, we might be able to finesse an Urza Saga build that makes sense. But it is very, very possible that I am wrong on this one. This is one of those times where I really and truly believe that this needs to just be tested and iterated on. I don't think there is a clear answer from the distance. But as someone who has played just tons and tons and tons of this archetype, removing a couple of City of Traders from the deck is a really, really big blow. And right now, in current Legacy in particular, just like trying to end the game is so very important. There are things like Oops All Spells running around. There is a lot of Blue-Black Reanimator running around. And the more time you dirtle, the more time you try to spend setting up things like Urza's Saga, uh, the worse your deck might end up being. And when I am done with this section, I'm going to talk about Urza's Saga's positioning in Legacy, generally speaking. I think the more natural home is in a Painter deck, because Painter decks already want to be playing both Urza's Saga and some number of Blood Moon effects in the main deck. Usually more Blood Moon effects in the sideboard in addition to that. So the fundamental difference here is Moonstompy does not want to be playing Urza's Saga, but might play Urza's Saga to take advantage of this rules change, whereas Painter naturally wants both of these effects and doesn't have to change at all. Although they can change to play more Moon effects if they want to try to really take advantage of this rules change. This is a recent top 8 Painter deck list, just for reference. So we have 4 Blood Moon effects already in the 75, full 4 Urza's Saga. In case you're not following current Legacy super closely, this Painter deck is on 4 main deck Swords to Plowshares, as well as some number of Celestial Purge in addition to that in the sideboard. It has become very, very important in current Legacy to deal with black creatures, especially Barrogoyf. That card is cracked, and red removal like Lightning Bolt and Fury just aren't getting the job done versus that. So the white splash right now makes a lot of sense to try and answer those. But if our metagame shifts a little bit and that becomes less important, you can take these Swords to Plowshares out of the deck, move some more Magus of the Moon, Blood Moon effects into the main deck, and potentially make your Urza Sagas even more resilient. Now, something that I haven't explicitly said yet is like thinking about Urza's Saga. If you have the Blood Moon down prior to the Urza Saga, you can still play the Urza Saga as a mountain. And this is a big change from the current rules. So even if you don't necessarily get to do the super cool construct thing, it's still just a land that can cast your spells, and that is fantastic. Will there be other homes for this interaction? Sure, you could play a blue Harbinger of the Seas deck that does this same sort of thing. But if you think about Harbinger of the Seas in the metagame, like that's not something that you play in the main deck, and it's not even all that common of a sideboard card either. Like it sees play, but it's not like we are in the peak of Eldrazi where like you just need to be able to shut off the non-basic lands or like you are going to have serious metagame problems. So why don't we go ahead and start talking about Urza Saga more generally within the confines of Legacy. As we go into this section, I want to make it clear that I love Urza Saga. I play with this card all the time. It is rare that a week goes by that I do not play an Urza Saga decklist of some kind for the channel. So I am an Urza Saga stan. All right, let's get this established first. I have my bias. I love this card. Now, as a stan of this card, I will now say Urza Saga is not a good card in Legacy. Yeah, Ancient Tomb enthusiast that I am going to be the first person to admit that Urza Saga is not very good in Legacy right now. Why? Honestly, this is the short answer. This Goyf is good in Dark Ritual decks. This Goyf, good in Ancient Tomb decks. This Goyf, good in combo decks. This Goyf, good in tempo decks. Okay, we can just call it a good card. If you think about how Urza Saga lines up versus this, it is just kind of a disaster. Your blue tempo opponents, your blue whatever opponent, maybe your mono black opponents too. So many people are going to be playing this card, and I expect this number only to go up over time. There was a time where having a pair of, say, 4/4 Urza Saga construct tokens, maybe one of which ends up getting haste off Lava Spur Boots or something like that, would just destroy a blue opponent in a fair attrition-based matchup. And then this card exists, which means that your Urza Saga tokens don't get to attack anymore. And then your opponent draws a removal spell. They attack in with this Squoif. You're like, oh shit, do I double block and get blown out by the removal spell, or do I just take the hit? I'll just take the hit. They trigger it, they find another one off of its trigger, they cast the other one, and the game is over. And this is a very, very common play pattern that I have seen in Legacy, where multiple turns worth of mana and resources and investment are just so easily invalidated these days by a single card that is either going to be played in the main deck, sideboard, or some combination thereof of most decks in Legacy that can possibly run it. Decks were previously playing all sorts of things to have to deal with Urza's Saga. There was a time where your dress downs, your meltdowns, your other things that could deal with multiple construct tokens at the same time. Think stuff like your Wrath of the Skies that could serve as a sweeper for them. That stuff was really popular. And there was a time when I was building Legacy sideboards that dealing with Urza's Saga was at the forefront of my mind. Well, now that's not really true anymore. The decks that are best playing Urza's Saga are often these broken combo decks that are trying to do really, really cool things with the One Ring, and Urza Saga becomes a backup plan for those sorts of decks. And the aggressive artifact-based decks that might just want to make large Urza Saga construct tokens, they aren't necessarily faring as well anymore. Now, does this rules change make Urza Saga better? Yes, absolutely, because one of the easiest ways to get rid of Urza Saga has been answered by a rules change. But if Urza Saga wasn't actually all that good in the first place within the rest of the metagame, then this might be less impactful of a change than people's gut reaction might be telling them that it is. And let's think about like tempo and the rate of play of Legacy right now. Oops, all spells. Let's start with the boogeyman of the format. The deck that I hope is just fully banned out of existence, nuked off the face of the earth with the BNR update later this month. You play turn 1 Urza Saga. Your opponent goes turn 1 Dark Ritual and gives you the middle finger as they floop their entire deck into their graveyard and reanimate a Thassa's Oracle. Your Urza Saga did not matter. You move to the post-sideboard game. You now have your Grafdigger's Cage that your Urza Saga can tutor up, and they won the game before the Urza Saga tutor target is relevant. And they won the game probably before you made a construct token, or at the very least, before you attacked with it. Okay, so Urza Saga, maybe not that viable versus a full-on, all-in combo deck like that. And versus something like a Dimir Reanimator deck, or sometimes they're Grixis now for some sideboard cards, you're perfectly happy playing an Urza Saga game if they are playing a tempo game. But as soon as a large creature like Atraxa or Archon of Cruelty gets into play, your Urza Saga actually looks really embarrassing in comparison to what they are doing. Oh, and by the way, they're also a deck that can play some Goyfs. And they're also a deck that might incidentally have some things that can buy time versus Urza Saga construct tokens, either in removal spells or things that are flexible like Brazen Borrower. So when we are thinking about the very top of the metagame here, Urza Saga doesn't line up particularly well versus that stuff. Now, will there be times when the Urza Saga is good? Yeah, absolutely. When you are grinding things out versus a slower deck that is looking to do things like draw a bunch of cards off up the Beanstalk and Rakshasa's Bargain, yeah, then it'll look good there. And if you assemble your Blood Moon combo with Urza's Saga and you shut off a bunch of your opponent's colored mana, you make it hard for them to cast their spells, and you create an ever-flowing stream of those construct tokens, yes, you are absolutely going to win those games. Unfortunately, by the numbers right now, there is so much more combo in Legacy than anything else right now. As of the time that I am recording this, and that is Monday, June 2nd, combo is currently 56% of Legacy, according to MTG Top 8. Control is up to a staggering 14%. Oh, okay. And the most popular control deck according to MTG Top 8 right now is lands at 4%, and the like blue-white control, bug control, 4-color control stuff each are at less than 1% of the format in the last 2 weeks. Just for the sake of comparison, I'll do the MTG Goldfish data as well, where Up the Beanstalk control is sitting at about 3.6% in the last 2 weeks. And again, it is your combo stuff up at the top of the format, about 17.5% Dimir Reanimator, 6% Oops All Spells, 6% Dimir Tempo as well, with Izzet Delver, Painter, Sneak and Show, Mystic Forge combo being the things behind that. So this rules update is going to incentivize you to play Urza's Saga, but the metagame itself, at least as of right now, is such that playing Urza's Saga isn't necessarily a good thing to be doing in the first place. So what might end up happening is a very strange thing, where we are going to get about 2 weeks of this rules change existing right after Final Fantasy releases before we get the next BNR update. And in that next BNR update, something should happen to Oops All Spells, and it is pretty likely that something might end up happening to Reanimator as well. And assuming that those things end up happening, we might get a weird period where people test Urza Saga and they go, okay, this was not actually good enough. And then we get some bannings coming in, and then all of a sudden there becomes breathing room in the metagame, things slow down a little bit, and all of a sudden, oh, this Urza Saga thing got really, really good. So I think we are going to find out very quickly in those first 2 weeks whether or not Urza's Saga plus Blood Moon is something that is good to do. But on a slightly longer time frame, we are having bans right around the corner, and that might change all of the initial data that we gather. So keep an open mind for about the next month and a half regarding Urza's Saga. All right, now let's assume for a moment that Urza's Saga plus Blood Moon, or Urza Saga plus Magus of the Moon, actually ends up being really good. Well, how are we going to fight that? Because traditionally, the answer to how do we fight that was we wasteland the Urza Saga. Well, that's not so much going to work anymore. Or traditionally, the answer was we play a Harbinger of the Seas, or a Blood Moon. Well, that's not going to work anymore either. And the answer is just really simple. Just play something that destroys an enchantment. Things that destroy enchantments are going to answer the Blood Moons that you might want to be answering anyway. And the Urza Saga itself is an enchantment, so just go for the throat and just tackle the problem directly. And you don't need to just play some sort of naturalize effect that just one for ones with an enchantment. You can probably find something that destroys an enchantment and takes something else with it. So Wrath of the Skies is a great example here. Just rereading this, destroy each artifact, creature, and enchantment with mana value less than or equal to the amount of energy paid this way. So Wrath of the Skies still is going to become a premium way to answer Urza Saga tokens, right? And this can take the permanent Urza Saga Mountain enchantment thing that you made with it, as it is still an enchantment. So for the brewers and tuners out there, I would be looking for these Pernicious Deed style cards that can take out an enchantment while maybe dealing with the construct tokens at the same time. And any sort of Serenity effect that can destroy all, artifacts and enchantments at the same time will do a lot of damage to these decks. If they are leaning more heavily into artifacts to squeeze in things like your Manifold Keys and Voltaic Keys, Shadow Spears, Lava Spur Boots, all that sort of stuff, these effects can take everything out at the same time. And keep in mind, you can also go back to some of the older ways that we answered cards like this in the past. You can still just Pithing Needle the Urza Saga just fine. That one won't necessarily answer the construct tokens that came with it initially, but if you are just knowing that this is going to be a problem for you over the course of the game, you can just turn one Pithing Needle Urza Saga and never have to deal with that and move on with your life. And again, if you can play Goyfs, real good versus Urza Saga players, especially if you can back them up with counterspells or removal. It will often take a red player 2 or 3 cards to take one of those things off the table. And if, they cast a Lightning Bolt style card and then cast a second one, and then you counter that second one, you get a lot of value, and they might not be able to attempt another way to remove it before the game is over. So let's go to some next level implications of this rules change. So we've already covered what I think about like the Moon Stompy and Painter decks that are going to be running the moon effects alongside the Urza Saga. But what about the non-moon Urza Saga decks that people might be using moons to fight against? This is where I think things are a little more interesting. Because again, I think the decks that take best advantage of Urza Saga in Legacy right now are these artifact combo decks that are looking to do really broken things with Karn or the One Ring ahead of schedule by playing some combination of Soul Lands or Cloud Posts or Planar Nexus plus Tron lands. And if decks were planning on fighting against them by using the Blood Moon and Harbinger of the Sea effects, well, now they can't do that anymore. And while people are expecting an uptick of Moon Stompy and Painter style decks, the reality of the situation might be that one of the common sideboard or main deck things that are good against these decks gets worse, and so these artifact combo decks are going to end up improving. So, looking forward to the short-term metagame, I might expect to see more people messing around with Mystic Forge. And if we expect that, then we can be prepared for that sort of stuff by playing more null rod effects that can just shut off all of these artifact-based things at the same time. And potentially cards like Disruptor Flute that can deal with the One Ring or Karn or Urza's Saga all in one sideboard slot. Disruptor Flute can be something that might be ticking up a little bit in this post rules change metagame. There is a little bit of tension there, though. If you are playing a bunch of null rod effects to stop like the fast artifact mana and the things like the One Ring themselves, then that means that you maybe can't play the sweepers that would destroy all artifacts. You can maybe still get away with some of them that just destroy the lesser CMC ones, like your Meltdowns and your Wrath of the Skies might work. But things that literally just destroy all artifacts, your Serenity style cards are maybe not what you want to be doing. So just kind of be aware of next level implications of this rules change. I don't think it is all going to be focused on just Moon Stompy as far as the impact on the Legacy metagame goes. So I think those are most of my important initial thoughts on the Saga rule changes and Blood Moon and such for Legacy. And if you're curious beyond what I have just said in this video, check out the Discord communities for things like Painter and Moon Stompy to see what they're saying. Just now, I just kind of flipped through the Moon Stompy Discord to see, were people's impressions along the same lines as what I was doing. There were a lot of people on like, yeah, Team Zero Saga in Moon Stompy sort of things going on there. So I I think my analysis is leaning in the right direction, but again, it is very possible that I am wrong, and it is very possible that a metagame mix-up will change my initial evaluation. I don't think the release of Final Fantasy itself is going to have a very large impact on Legacy. This is not going to be like the last couple of summer sets we have had with things like Lord of the Rings and Modern Horizons 3 and all that stuff. This is a standard legal set, so the power level is appropriate for standard. As some final thoughts here, keep an eye on my Mox field. All of the deck lists that I am going to be crafting for the upcoming metagame are going to be available there. Mox field is great. You should be using them if you are building decks. And folks, if you need any cards for the upcoming metagame, if you don't have your Urza's Sagas already, if you need your Blood Moons or whatever, check out toamagic.com. Promo code ThrabenU will always save you 5% on your order. You always get free shipping. And to expedite that shipping to make sure you have them before Vegas, you can do that. Or if you want to pick up on site in Vegas, you can do that as well. And with that, folks, I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day, and regular gameplay content will return tomorrow. See ya!